The first human railgun fired, and the lords of the galaxy bowed at last. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the council tower, staring at the impossible beauty of the galactic capital. Ships from 800 different worlds moved through the sky like schools of fish, each one a different shape, a different color, a different dream of what space travel could be. 3 months ago she would have cried at the sight. Today she wanted to put her fist through the crystalline window. "They're doing it again," Commander Marcus Webb said behind her. His reflection appeared in the glass, arms crossed, jaw tight. "The Althari just blocked our proposal for upgraded shield generators. 3rd time this month." Sarah closed her eyes. "Let me guess. Too advanced for a newcomer species? They said our application showed insufficient understanding of energy harmonics." Marcus moved beside her, his voice bitter. "We invented fusion reactors before we left our solar system, but apparently we don't understand energy." The Galactic Council had seemed like a miracle when the Viridian exploration ship found Earth 2 years ago. Humanity had just achieved faster-than-light travel, crude and slow compared to the rest of the galaxy, but functional. The Viridians had been kind, excited even. They said humanity showed promise. They said the Council would welcome Earth with open arms. They had been half right. The Council did welcome humanity. They threw ceremonies, gave speeches, and assigned Earth a seat in the Grand Chamber where representatives from 847 species decided the fate of the galaxy. But that seat came with rules. So many rules. The Edict of Limitation was the worst of them. Sarah had read it 100 times, trying to find loopholes in the ancient text. The document was older than human civilization, written in a trade language that her translator implant struggled to parse. But the meaning was clear enough. No kinetic weapons above Class 2. No projectiles faster than 2 kilometers per second. No mass-based warfare systems. The Council called it a peace treaty. Sarah called it a cage. "Energy weapons only," she muttered, pulling up a holographic display from her wrist terminal. Plasma cannons, particle beams, directed energy systems, the civilized way to fight. Marcus snorted. "Civilized? Right. The Vrex Dominion has 60 worlds under occupation, but they use energy weapons, so the Council looks the other way." Era swiped through the data, frustration building in her chest. Earth's defense fleet consisted of 23 ships, all equipped with Council-approved energy weapons purchased at premium prices from the Althari Consortium. The weapons were good, she had to admit. Clean, efficient, no ammunition to carry. But they were also designed for energy shields, for opponents who fought the same way everyone else in the galaxy fought. Humanity had never developed energy shields. Earth's history of warfare had gone a different direction. Bullets, missiles, railguns, kinetic kill vehicles. When humans needed to destroy something, they threw mass at it very, very fast. It was simple physics. It worked. But the Council said it was primitive. Dr. Chen, Commander Webb. The voice came from the doorway, crisp and formal. Ambassador Liu stepped into the observation deck, her expression grave. "We have a situation." Sarah's stomach dropped. Ambassador Liu never delivered good news personally. "The Council received a formal challenge this morning," Liu continued. "The Vrex Dominion has declared an integration conflict against New Terra Colony." "Integration conflict?" Marcus stepped forward. "That's Council speak for invasion." "Yes." Liu pulled up a star map, and the small blue dot of New Terra appeared, surrounded by red Vrex markers. "They're calling it a standard worthiness test. They say humanity needs to prove we can defend our territory before we deserve full Council protection." Sarah felt her hands curl into fists. "New Terra has 2 million people, civilians, families. The Vrex are sending 47 warships." Liu's voice stayed level, professional, but Sarah could see the anger in her eyes. "Our fleet can maybe field 12 ships in time. The Council has declined to intervene." "Of course they have," Marcus said. "Let the newcomers get bloodied. See if we're worth keeping around." Liu looked at them both. "The President has authorized full military response. I need you two on the next transport to Fleet Command. We have 6 days before the Vrex reach New Terra." The transport flight took 4 hours. Sarah spent the time running simulations on her personal terminal, watching the same defeat play out in a dozen different ways. Human energy weapons were good, but they were standardized Council technology. The Vrex had been using energy warfare for 3,000 years. They knew every trick, every counter, every weakness. Fleet Command was organized chaos when they arrived. Officers shouted orders, holographic displays showed ship positions and supply lines, and somewhere in the background, a news feed showed panicked colonists on New Terra loading onto evacuation ships. Admiral Zhang met them in the strategy room, a tall woman with iron-gray hair and the kind of eyes that had seen too many battles. Chen, Webb, I read your files. You're the physics expert and the weapons specialist. Yes, ma'am, they said together. Zhang pulled up a tactical display. I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to forget everything the Council told you about civilized warfare. She zoomed in on the Vrex fleet composition. Can we win this fight? Sarah looked at the numbers, looked at the weapons inventory, looked at the shield strength comparisons. No, ma'am. Not with what we have. That's what I thought. Zhang leaned on the table. So we need what we don't have. Ideas? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, he said, what if we don't fight the way they expect? Explain, Zhang said. The Vrex are good at energy warfare because everyone uses energy warfare, Marcus continued. Their shields are designed to disperse plasma, deflect particle beams, absorb directed energy. That's what the galaxy has been doing for 100,000 years. Sarah felt something click in her mind. But Earth didn't develop energy shields, we never needed them. Because we used kinetic weapons, Marcus finished. Mass, speed, impact. Zhang's eyes narrowed. The edict forbids kinetic weapons above Class 2. Yes, ma'am, Sarah said, her heart starting to race. It does. The Admiral was quiet. Outside, someone shouted about supply shipments. A comm officer relayed evacuation numbers from New Terra. The galaxy kept turning, kept pretending everything was normal, while 2 million humans waited to see if anyone would save them. There's an old project, Marcus said quietly, from before first contact. Project Thor. It was a capital ship railgun system. We abandoned it because the power requirements were impossible with pre-FTL technology. Sarah pulled up her terminal, fingers flying across the holographic interface. We have fusion cores now. Viridian-designed matter-antimatter catalyzed. The energy output is 50 times what we had before. How big of a projectile? Zhang asked. The design called for a 500-kilogram tungsten slug, Marcus said. Accelerated to 0.15 light speed. The room went silent. Sarah ran the numbers, her hands shaking slightly as the results appeared. That's 15,000 megatons of kinetic energy. That's more than anything the galaxy has seen in 100 millennia, Zhang finished. Because the edict made sure of it. It would take months to build, Marcus said. We'd need manufacturing facilities, testing, safety protocols. We have 6 days, Zhang interrupted. Can you do it in 6 days? Sarah looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at Sarah. They both thought about New Terra, about 2 million people, about the Vrex fleet coming like a storm. We can try, Sarah said. Zhang nodded once. Then get me a railgun, Dr. Chen. Get me a weapon that will make the Vrex forget every lesson they ever learned about warfare. The next 6 days were a blur of mathematics, engineering, and barely controlled panic. Sarah assembled a team of 40 engineers, pulling experts from universities, defense contractors, and anyone who had ever worked on electromagnetic propulsion. Marcus coordinated with the shipyards, clearing construction space on the UES Defiance, humanity's newest dreadnought-class vessel. The Defiance was beautiful in its way. 2 kilometers long, bristling with Council-approved energy weapons powered by a fusion core that could light up a small moon. It was the pride of Earth's fleet, designed to show the galaxy that humanity belonged among the stars. Now they were going to bolt a railgun to it and hope the whole thing didn't explode. The power draw is the main problem, Sarah explained to her team on day 2. A conventional capacitor system can't store enough energy without melting. What about cascade storage? Asked Dr. Yuki Tanaka, her lead engineer. Use multiple capacitor banks, charge them in sequence, then discharge all at once. Sarah ran the numbers. It would work, but the charging time would be hours. We'd get one shot, maybe two, before the Vrex fleet turned us into debris. One shot might be all we need, Marcus said. He was watching the tactical feeds, watching the Vrex fleet move closer to New Terra. 4 days out now. If we hit their flagship, the rest might scatter. If we hit anything at all, Yuki muttered. We're talking about hitting a target 400,000 kilometers away, while both it and we are moving at combat speeds. The targeting computer for this doesn't exist. Then we build it, Sarah said. We have 4 days. On day 3, the Galactic Council found out. The message came through official channels delivered by a Viridian observer stationed at Fleet Command. Sarah was elbow-deep in capacitor arrays when Marcus pulled her aside, his face pale. We have visitors, he said. The Viridian was tall and willowy, with silver skin that reflected the hangar lights. Behind him stood 3 other aliens, species Sarah didn't recognize. The Viridian's voice was sad, almost apologetic. Dr. Chen, Commander Webb, I am Observer Kanseth. I must inform you that your current project violates the Edict of Limitation. You are required to cease construction immediately. Sarah felt her temper snap. 2 million humans are going to die and you're worried about an edict? The edict exists for galactic stability, Kanseth said. Kinetic weapons of the magnitude you are constructing represent an existential threat. A single projectile at relativistic speeds could destroy a planet. So could your energy weapons, Marcus shot back. I've seen the specifications on Council antimatter warheads. Don't pretend this is about safety. One of the other aliens stepped forward, a being of pure energy contained in a shimmering field. Sarah's translator implant identified it as one of the 5 lords, the ancient beings who ruled the Council. Its voice was like wind chimes and thunder at once. Humanity, you do not understand what you are creating. The edict was written after the kinetic wars, when entire species destroyed each other with relativistic weapons. We brought peace by limiting such destruction. You brought peace by making sure no one could challenge you, Sarah said. The edict favors species with energy-based evolution. You built a galaxy where only your kind of warfare is legal. The Lord's energy field flickered. You risk exile, quarantine, or elimination. Admiral Zhang appeared from the command center, her voice cutting across the hangar. Then eliminate us. But do it after we save our people. You want to enforce your edict? Fine, come back in 7 days. If we survive the Vrex, you can pass judgment then. The Lord and its companion stared at Zhang for a long moment. Then without another word, they vanished in a shimmer of light. Kanseth remained, looking miserable. I am sorry, he said quietly. I will file my report. What happens next is beyond my control. Then you'd better file it slowly, Zhang said. We need 3 more days. The Viridian looked at them, at the half-assembled railgun, at the humans working with desperate speed. Then he nodded once and left. On day 6, they finished. The railgun stretched along the Defiance's spine like the world's largest rifle. 2 kilometers of electromagnetic rails, powered by a cascade capacitor system that could store enough energy to vaporize a city. The targeting computer was a patchwork of human and alien systems, calibrated by hand because they didn't have time for proper testing. Sarah stood in the fire control center, staring at the weapon they had built. It was ugly, brutal, nothing like the elegant energy weapons the Council favored. It looked exactly like what it was, a gun scaled up to the size of a warship. It's going to work, Marcus said beside her. He didn't sound certain. It has to, Sarah replied. Admiral Zhang's voice came over the intercom. All hands, this is the Admiral. The Vrex fleet has entered the New Terra system. The Defiance launches in 1 hour. Get ready to show the galaxy what humanity can do. Sarah took one last look at the railgun, at Project Thor, at humanity's answer to 100,000 years of galactic rules. Then she went to her battle station and prepared to fire a weapon that would change everything. Outside, the stars waited. The Vrex fleet waited. The Galactic Council waited, and somewhere, in dimensions beyond normal space, the 5 lords watched with ancient eyes, wondering if they had finally met a species that would not bow to their eternal rule. The countdown began. The first human railgun fired, and the lords of the galaxy bowed at last. The UES Defiance tore through the fabric of space, its faster-than-light drive pushing reality aside like curtains. Inside the fire control center, Sarah Chen watched the countdown timer with a sick feeling in her stomach. 18 hours to New Terra. 18 hours before they would learn if Project Thor was a miracle or a very expensive way to die. Capacitor banks at 15%. Lieutenant Park reported from the engineering station. Charging as expected. We'll hit full power in approximately 16 hours. Commander Marcus Webb studied the tactical display, his face illuminated by the blue glow of holographic projections. The Vrex beat us there by 8 hours. They're already in position. Sarah pulled up the sensor data from New Terra's defense satellites, what few remained operational. The Vrex fleet spread across the system like a disease. 47 warships in standard siege formation. Their flagship, the Bloodied Crown, sat at the center, twice the size of the Defiance and bristling with energy weapons. Evacuation status? Admiral Zhang asked from the command chair. 600,000 colonists off-world so far, the communications officer replied. But the Vrex have established a blockade. Transport ships are being turned back or destroyed if they try to run. Zhang's jaw tightened. So they're using the colonists as bait. They want us to come. It's what I would do, Marcus said quietly. They know we can't leave civilians to die. They'll pick us apart while we try to save people. Sarah watched the Vrex formations, analyzing their ship positions, their energy signatures, their shield configurations. Everything about them screamed confidence. Why wouldn't they be confident? They had done this 100 times before on 100 different worlds. The Vrex Dominion had been conquering systems for 3,000 years, always following council rules, always using approved methods, energy warfare. Clean, civilized, proper, Dr. Chen. Zhang's voice cut through her thoughts. Is the weapon ready? Sarah looked at the Railgun diagnostics, at the maze of systems they had built in 6 impossible days. Mechanically, yes. The rails are aligned, the targeting computer is functional, and the capacitor cascade is charging smoothly. But, Zhang pressed, but we've never fired it, Sarah admitted. Not even a test shot. We don't know if the recoil will tear the ship apart. We don't know if the targeting will be accurate at combat ranges. We don't even know if the Vrex shields will react to kinetic impact the way we think they will. So we're betting 2 million lives on a theory, Marcus said. We're betting on physics, Sarah corrected. Energy shields work by dispersing incoming energy across a field boundary. They're designed for plasma, for particles, for directed energy. A solid projectile moving at 15% light speed isn't energy. It's mass. And mass doesn't get dispersed. Zhang smiled grimly. So either we're brilliant or we're about to die in the stupidest way possible. Yes, ma'am, Sarah said. The Defiance dropped out of FTL at the edge of the New Terra system with all the subtlety of a meteor strike. Every sensor in the system immediately locked onto them. On the tactical display, Sarah watched as 47 Vrex ships turned to face the newcomers. We're being hailed, the comm officer said. Put it on screen, Zhang ordered. The view screen flickered, and a Vrex commander appeared. Lord Thexeron was typical of his species. Reptilian features, scales like burnished copper, eyes that held nothing but contempt. When he spoke, his voice was smooth and amused. Ah, the humans arrive. How predictable. One ship against my entire fleet. He leaned back in his command throne. I admire your courage, Admiral, even as I pity your stupidity. Lord Thexeron, Zhang replied calmly. Withdraw your forces from New Terra, and we can end this without bloodshed. The Vrex commander laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Bloodshed? You misunderstand, human. This is not a battle. This is a lesson. The Council wants to see if your species is worth keeping. I intend to demonstrate that you are not. Then you've made your choice, Zhang said. My conscience is clear. Wait, Thexeron said, holding up a clawed hand. I am not without mercy. I offer you one chance, Admiral. Surrender your ship. Pledge humanity to serve the Vrex Dominion. In exchange, I will allow your colonists to live as servants rather than corpses. The bridge went silent. Sarah felt her hands curl into fists. Zhang's expression never changed. I have a counteroffer, Lord Thexeron. Leave now while you still can. The Vrex commander's amusement vanished. Then you will die. All of you. The screen went dark. Battle stations, Zhang ordered. Webb, how long until we can fire? Marcus checked the capacitor status. 3 hours and 42 minutes. We need to buy time. Then we buy it. Zhang opened the fleet channel. All human ships, this is the Admiral. Form defensive screen around the Defiance. Our job is to survive long enough for the weapon to charge. Whatever happens, we do not break formation. Sarah counted the friendly markers on the tactical display. 12 human ships against 47 Vreks. The odds were impossible, but the human crews didn't hesitate. The ships moved into position, creating a protective shell around the Defiance. The Vreks fleet advanced. Incoming fire, the sensor officer warned. Multiple plasma lance strikes. The battle began with light, brilliant, and terrible. Vreks energy weapons lashed out across the void. Crimson beams that could boil metal and shatter stone. Human shields flared as they absorbed the impacts, energy barriers glowing like captured stars. Return fire, Zhang commanded. All batteries full spread. The human ships answered with their own energy weapons, blue-white particle beams that sliced through space. Sarah watched the exchange on her monitors. Watched as energy met energy, shields met shields, exactly as the galaxy had fought for 100,000 years. And slowly, inevitably, humanity began to lose. The UES Valor took a direct hit, Marcus reported. Shields down to 30%. The Wellington reports primary weapons offline. Multiple breaches on the Yamato, decks 5 through 7. Sarah watched the timer. 3 hours until the railgun could fire. The Defiance shuddered as enemy fire found its shields, and she grabbed the edge of her console for balance. Dr. Chen, Admiral Zhang said, her voice steady despite the chaos. Tell me about the weapon. Help me understand what we're about to do. Sarah pulled up a holographic model of the railgun, grateful for something to focus on besides the battle. A railgun is simple physics, Admiral. You have 2 parallel rails charged with opposite electrical polarities. When you place a conductive projectile between them, it completes the circuit. The electromagnetic force accelerates the projectile along the rails. Like a motor, Zhang said. Exactly, but scaled up impossibly large. Our rails are 2 kilometers long. The projectile is 500 kilograms of tungsten, chosen because it's dense and heat-resistant. The capacitor banks will discharge 15 gigawatts of power in half a second. Marcus added, the projectile will exit the barrel at 0.15 light speed. At that velocity, the kinetic energy is more than any nuclear weapon humanity ever built. And the Vreks shields? Zhang asked. Energy shields work by creating a field that disperses incoming energy, Sarah explained. They're incredibly effective against plasma, lasers, particle beams. But a solid projectile isn't energy, it's mass. The shield might slow it down fractionally, but at the velocities we're talking about, it's like trying to stop a planet with tissue paper. An explosion rocked the ship. The lights flickered. Direct hit on starboard shields, someone shouted. Down to 40%. 2 hours and 10 minutes, Marcus said, staring at the capacitor readout. The battle turned desperate. The UES Valor exploded in a flash of contained fusion. Its reactor breached by sustained Vreks fire. The Wellington broke formation, limping away on emergency thrusters. 3 more human ships were critically damaged, barely functional. Sarah watched the carnage and felt a cold clarity settle over her. This was what the Council had wanted. This was the test. Humanity fights with Council-approved weapons, loses badly, and learns their place in the galactic order. The strong remain strong, the weak remain weak, and everyone follows the rules. 1 hour, Marcus said. The Defiance's shields were down to 20%. Vrek ships surrounded them now. A closing net of predators. On the view screen, Lord Thexaron appeared again, his smile cruel. You have fought well, Admiral, for primitives, but this ends now. My fleet will strip your shields, breach your hull, and I will personally execute your crew. And when I return to Council space, I will tell them that humanity died because they refused to know their place. 30 minutes, Marcus whispered. The shield indicator dropped to 15%, then 10. Explosions bloomed along the Defiance's hull as enemy fire found weak points. Sarah ran simulations in her head, calculating trajectories, compensating for the Defiance's damage, for the Vreks formation, for the chaotic movement of battle. They would get one shot. If they missed, it was over. 15 minutes, the engineering deck reported multiple breaches. Life support was failing on 3 levels. The remaining human ships were barely holding together, their crews fighting with everything they had to buy a few more minutes. Admiral Zhang stood from her command chair and walked to the view screen, staring out at the Vreks fleet. Dr. Chen, when you were a girl, what did you want to be? The question was so unexpected that Sarah blinked. I wanted to be an astronaut, ma'am. I wanted to see the stars. And here you are, Zhang said softly, farther from Earth than any human has ever been, about to fire a weapon that will either save millions or doom us all. She turned back to face the bridge. Commander Webb, is the weapon ready? Marcus checked his console. Capacitors at 98%, within firing parameters. Dr. Chen, do you have a target? Sarah brought up the targeting overlay. The Vrex flagship sat 400,000 kilometers away, surrounded by its fleet. A perfect shot would be impossible. The flagship was maneuvering, the Defiance was damaged, and they had never tested the targeting computer. But perfect wasn't required. They just needed close enough. Target locked, Sarah said. The bloodied crown, Lord Thexeran's flagship. Capacitors at full charge, Marcus reported. Weapon ready to fire. Admiral Zhang looked around the bridge at her crew. Young faces, old faces, humans who had left Earth to find new homes in the stars. They were battered, bleeding but unbroken. The galaxy has rules, Zhang said. Ancient rules made by ancient powers, designed to keep the strong strong and the weak weak. Today we break those rules. Today we show them that humanity doesn't bow. She raised her hand. Fire. Sarah pressed the firing stud. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the capacitors discharged. 15 gigawatts of power flooding into the railgun's electromagnetic coils. The rails hummed with energy, a sound that resonated through the ship's superstructure like the tolling of a bell. The tungsten slug sat between the rails, 500 kilograms of dense metal inscribed with coordinates and equations. Then the electromagnetic force grabbed it and it began to move. 2 kilometers in half a second. The slug accelerated at forces that would have compressed a human being into paste. Faster, faster, until it reached terminal velocity and burst from the barrel in a flash of ionized air. 0.15 light speed. Every sensor in the new Terra system registered the event. The energy discharge created an electromagnetic pulse that spread through space like a shockwave, briefly disrupting communications across 3 light minutes. On 100 different ships in 100 different languages, beings stopped and stared at their instruments in confusion. What was that? The slug crossed 400,000 kilometers in 0.89 seconds. Lord Thexeran was in the middle of giving an order when his flagship ceased to exist. The kinetic energy hit the bloodied crown shields first, and for a microsecond the shields tried to do their job. They tried to disperse the energy, to spread it across the field boundary, to protect the ship as they had been designed to do. Then the slug hit. 15,000 megatons of kinetic energy, concentrated in a 500-kilogram projectile, moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The shields vanished like popped bubbles. The armor plating might as well have been paper. The slug passed through the flagship from bow to stern, and the kinetic energy transferred into heat and shock and devastation. The bloodied crown didn't explode. It disintegrated. The shockwave expanded outward, catching 8 nearby Vrex ships in its radius. Shields failed, hulls buckled, ships spun out of control, trailing atmosphere and debris. And then there was silence. On the Defiance's bridge, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Sarah stared at her instruments, at the empty space where the flagship had been, at the chaos spreading through the Vrex fleet. My God, someone whispered. Vrex fleet is breaking formation, Marcus said, his voice shaking. They're running. And they were. The remaining Vrex ships turned and fled, their commanders too shocked to maintain discipline. Within minutes, 47 ships had become 38 fleeing contacts, jumping to FTL as fast as their drives could engage. Admiral Zhang sat down slowly in her chair. Stand down from battle stations. Damage control teams report. Medical teams to all decks. She looked at Sarah. Dr. Chen, inform New Terra that the siege is lifted. Sarah opened the channel with trembling hands. New Terra, this is the UES Defiance. The Vrex fleet has retreated. You are safe. The response came after a long pause, and Sarah could hear the tears in the controller's voice. Defiance, this is New Terra. We saw it. Everyone saw it. What was that weapon? Sarah looked at Marcus, then at Admiral Zhang. The Admiral nodded. That, Sarah said, was humanity saying no. But even as New Terra celebrated, as human crews cheered and wept, Sarah pulled up her long-range sensors and saw something that made her blood run cold. Across the galaxy, from Council space, observers were moving. Ships, probes, and things that defied classification, all converging on New Terra, and somewhere beyond normal space. In dimensions where the Five Lords dwelled, Ancient beings stirred and looked upon humanity with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. They had watched the shot heard across the galaxy, and they were coming. The first human railgun fired and the Lords of the Galaxy bowed at last. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began 63 hours after the railgun fired. Sarah Chen sat in the human delegation's gallery, surrounded by representatives from 847 species, and felt the weight of thousands of eyes upon her. The council chamber was a monument to ancient power. It hung in space above the capital world, a structure so vast it had its own gravity field. The walls were transparent, showing the stars beyond, and in the center of the chamber floated the thrones of the 5 lords. Sarah had never seen the lords manifest physically before. Most species hadn't. The lords were energy beings, older than most civilizations, and they typically ruled from beyond normal space. Their physical forms were rare, reserved for moments of great importance. Apparently, humanity breaking the edict qualified. Lord Sovereign appeared first, a being of pure light contained in a roughly humanoid shape. Its voice resonated directly in Sarah's mind, bypassing sound entirely. The council recognizes the human delegation. Dr. Sarah Chen, Commander Marcus Webb, Admiral Zhang. You stand accused of violating the Edict of Limitation, creating a weapon of mass destruction, and threatening galactic stability. How do you answer these charges? Sarah stood, her legs shaking despite her determination to appear calm. Marcus and Admiral Zhang stood with her. Behind them sat Ambassador Liu and 36 other human representatives. But Sarah knew the galaxy's attention was focused on the 3 who had built the weapon. We answer that we defended our people, Sarah said, her voice carrying through the chamber's acoustic systems. The Vrex Dominion attacked a human colony with 47 warships. The council declined to intervene. We did what was necessary to save 2 million lives. A ripple of movement went through the chamber, species conferring, translators working. Over time, the political machinery of the galaxy grinding into motion, Lord Sovereign's light flickered. Necessity does not absolve violation. The edict exists for the protection of all species. Kinetic weapons at relativistic velocities represent an extinction-level threat. So do antimatter warheads, Marcus said, stepping forward. So do plasma weapons capable of glassing entire planets. The Council permits those weapons. The difference is that energy-based species control those weapons. Another lord materialized, this one appearing as a geometric shape that hurt to look at directly. Lord Architect's voice was like mathematics given sound. The edict was written after the kinetic wars, human. Before the edict, species weaponized asteroids, launched relativistic kill vehicles, and destroyed each other with mass-based weapons. Entire worlds were rendered uninhabitable. The edict brought peace. Sarah pulled up a holographic display from her wrist terminal, projecting data into the center of the chamber. I've analyzed the edict's language and the mathematical models underlying it. The restrictions on kinetic weapons are not symmetric with restrictions on energy weapons. A Class 2 kinetic weapon is limited to 2 kilometers per second, which produces minimal destructive force. But Council-approved energy weapons can deliver megatons of destructive power with no restrictions. She highlighted sections of code, equations that governed weapon classifications. The edict doesn't prevent planet-killing weapons. It prevents mass-based weapons. It's not about peace. It's about maintaining technological dominance. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted in hundreds of languages, some supporting Sarah's argument, others denouncing it. The 5 lords remained silent, their ancient forms floating above the chaos. A Vrex representative stood, his scales bristling with rage. The humans destroyed a Vrex flagship, killed thousands. This is an act of war. Your fleet attacked a human colony first, Admiral Zhang replied coldly. Under Council law, we had the right to defend ourselves. With approved weapons, the Vrex shouted. You used an illegal weapon to gain unfair advantage. Unfair, Zhang repeated, her voice cutting through the noise. Let me tell you about unfair. Humanity joins the Council with energy weapons we purchased from the Althari Consortium at prices that bankrupted 3 Earth governments. We follow every rule, attend every session, pay every fee. And when the Vrex attack us, the Council calls it an integration conflict and looks the other way. She gestured to the Vrex delegation. Your species has occupied 60 worlds in the past century. You've subjugated 42 different species. But you use energy weapons, so the Council permits it. That's not peace. That's sanctioned conquest. The chamber fell silent. Sarah saw representatives from younger species nodding, while the older, more established powers looked uncomfortable. Lord Sovereign's form brightened. You speak of unfairness, Admiral. But consider what you have done. You have created a weapon that bypasses the defensive systems every species has developed over millennia. Every shield, every defensive field, every protection is now obsolete against your railgun. Yes, Sarah said simply. Just as every defensive system humanity tried to develop was obsolete against Council energy weapons. We didn't evolve energy manipulation like you did. Our path was different. The edict ensured we would always be at a disadvantage. A new voice entered the discussion. A Quilix representative stood, a small insectoid being with compound eyes that reflected the chamber's lights. I am mathematician Zixith of Quilix. I have reviewed Dr. Chen's data. Her analysis is correct. The Quilix projected their own hologram, complex mathematical proofs that spiraled through the chamber. The Edict of Limitation contains embedded biases that favor energy-based weapon systems. When analyzed statistically, species with kinetic-based technological development are restricted to 63% lower offensive capability compared to energy-based species. This is absurd, an Althari delegate stood, his crystalline body refracting light. The edict has maintained galactic peace for 100,000 years. Has it? Zixith replied. Or has it maintained galactic dominance for established powers? How many wars have the Five Lords fought? 0. How many wars have client species fought? Hundreds. The edict does not prevent war, it regulates who can win wars. More voices joined the debate. 23 younger species, many of them restricted by various Council limitations, began speaking out. Sarah realized with a start that humanity wasn't alone. Other species had been chafing under the Council's rules, waiting for someone to challenge the system. Lord Sovereign raised a hand, and silence fell instantly. Enough. The debate is noted. But the fact remains. Humanity has created a weapon that threatens the established order. This cannot be permitted. A third Lord manifested, this one appearing as a swirl of dark matter barely held together by gravitational fields. Lord Entropy's voice was a whisper that somehow filled the chamber. We offer humanity a choice. Share the railgun technology with the Council. Allow us to regulate its distribution. In exchange, humanity will be granted clemency for the edict violation. Sarah felt her heart sink. Share the technology, and the Council would ensure only approved species received it. The Lords would maintain control, just with a new weapon added to their arsenal. Marcus stepped forward. And if we refuse? Then humanity will be quarantined to your solar system, Lord Sovereign said. No trade, no travel, no contact. You will exist in isolation until you agree to Council authority. Or, Lord Entropy added, its voice cold, the Council will take more direct action. Your species will be classified as a galactic threat. The combined fleets will sterilize Earth and all human colonies. The threat hung in the chamber like a physical weight. Sarah saw Ambassador Lu's face go pale. Around them, human delegates gripped their seats, processing the reality that they might have just doomed their entire species. Admiral Zhang was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, a sharp, predatory expression that made several nearby aliens lean away. You can't do that, Zhang said. Admiral. Lord Sovereign's voice carried a warning. We are the Five Lords. We have governed this galaxy for 100,000 years, yes, we know, Zhang interrupted. But you can't sterilize humanity. And do you know why? She pulled up her own display showing Earth's orbital shipyards. Because in the 3 days since we fired the railgun, humanity has begun mass production. We have 47 more ships under refit. Every human vessel in our fleet is being equipped with railgun technology. The chamber exploded in chaos. In addition, Zhang continued over the shouting, we've transmitted the complete railgun specifications to 23 species who voted in support of edict reform. The Quilix have the data. The Viridian Free States have it. The younger species you've kept under your control for centuries now have a weapon you can't defend against. Lord Sovereign's form flared with anger. You have doomed the galaxy to chaos! No, Sarah said, stepping beside Zhang. We've given the galaxy a choice. You can continue enforcing an edict that maintains inequality, knowing that any species can now build weapons you can't stop. Or you can abolish the edict and write new laws that don't favor energy-based evolution. You would spread this weapon to everyone? Lord Architect's mathematical form pulsed with what might have been disbelief. We would spread equality, Marcus replied. The galaxy isn't peaceful because of the edict. It's stratified. The strong prey on the weak, and the Council looks away as long as proper weapons are used. That ends now. Lord Entropy's dark form swirled faster. You do not understand the consequences. The kinetic wars destroyed hundreds of worlds. Species turned their own moons into projectiles. We barely survived that era. Then maybe, Sarah said softly, the solution isn't limiting weapons. Maybe it's giving everyone the same weapons so no one has an advantage. The five lords conferred silently, their forms flickering as they communicated in ways beyond human perception. The chamber waited, 847 species holding their breath. Finally, Lord Sovereign spoke. The Council will recess for deliberation. Humanity, you have forced our hand in ways we did not think possible. We will return with our decision. The lords vanished and the chamber dissolved into frantic discussion. Sarah collapsed into her seat, adrenaline finally fading. Marcus sat beside her, his hands shaking. Did we just threaten to arm the entire galaxy? He asked. Yes, Sarah said. Are we insane? Probably. Ambassador Liu leaned forward from the row behind them. The Quilix delegation wants to meet with us. So do the Viridians, the Crix, and 12 other species. They're calling it the Coalition for Edict Reform. How many is that? Cheng asked. 26 species so far, Liu replied. Small populations, limited military power, but all of them have been restricted by various council limitations. You've started a movement. Sarah pulled up the sensor data from Earth. The shipyards worked around the clock, human engineers installing railgun systems on every available vessel. It was a desperate gamble. If the council decided to attack, humanity couldn't win. But if enough species joined the coalition, if enough voices demanded change, Dr. Chen, a Quilix aide, approached nervously. Mathematician Zixith requests your presence. There are technical details about railgun construction that several species wish to discuss. Sarah looked at Zhang, who nodded. Go. Help them understand the weapon. Make sure they can build their own. As Sarah followed the Quilix aide through the corridors of the council station, she passed representatives from dozens of species. Some looked at her with fear, some with anger, but many looked at her with hope. The kind of desperate hope that comes from seeing a chance at change after centuries of stagnation. In a private conference room, 23 species representatives waited. Engineers, scientists, military specialists. They had holographic displays showing their attempts at railgun designs, calculations for power requirements, questions about materials and targeting systems. Dr. Chen, Zixeth said, their compound eyes reflecting the blue light of the displays. We need your help. Not just with the weapon, but with the philosophy behind it. How do you build a weapon that makes warfare equal? Sarah looked at the assembled beings. So different from each other, so different from humanity, but all of them wanted the same thing. A chance to stand equal in a galaxy that had denied them that chance for so long. You don't build a weapon that makes warfare equal, Sarah said. You build a weapon that makes warfare so terrible that negotiation becomes preferable. The railgun isn't just a gun. It's a statement. What statement? Asked a Viridian engineer. Sarah pulled up the specifications for Project Thor, the weapon that had changed everything. The statement is simple. The rules you made can be broken. The advantages you held can be overcome. The hierarchy you built can fall. She looked around the room. And most importantly, we will not bow. The species representatives studied the data, asking questions, taking notes, planning. Sarah helped them understand electromagnetic acceleration, capacitor arrays, targeting solutions. She shared everything, holding nothing back, because somewhere in the depths of the council station, the five lords were deciding humanity's fate. And Sarah knew that the only way to survive was to make sure that if humanity fell, the old order would fall with them. The galaxy would change. It already had. Outside the conference room, in the vast chamber where 847 species debated the future, tensions rose. Old alliances fractured, new coalitions formed. The Rex Dominion called for war. The Althari Consortium threatened economic sanctions, and 26 species stood together, united by a simple idea: that the rules of the galaxy could be rewritten, that power could be challenged, that even the lords could be made to bow. The recess lasted 3 days. 3 days of frantic preparation, desperate diplomacy, and growing certainty that the galaxy stood on the edge of something unprecedented. When the 5 lords finally returned to the chamber, their forms seemed dimmer somehow, less certain. Lord Sovereign addressed the assembled species, and for the first time in Sarah's memory, an ancient being sounded tired. "The Council has reached a decision," it said, "and it is a decision that will reshape the galaxy." Sarah held her breath. The lords were about to bow. The first human railgun fired, and the lords of the galaxy bowed at last. Lord Sovereign's form dimmed and brightened, as if the ancient being was gathering strength for what came next. Sarah Chen watched from the human delegation's gallery, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Around her, 847 species waited in silence that felt heavier than gravity. For 100,000 years, Lord Sovereign began, its voice resonating through the chamber. "The 5 lords have governed the Galactic Council. We brought order from chaos. We ended the kinetic wars. We created peace through the Edict of Limitation." Sarah felt Marcus tense beside her. This sounded like the prelude to a rejection, to war, to humanity's isolation or extinction. "We believed," Lord Sovereign continued, "that our rule was benevolent, that our experience and wisdom justified our authority, that the younger species needed our guidance to avoid the mistakes of the past." Lord Architect manifested beside Sovereign, its geometric form pulsing with complex patterns. "We were wrong," the chamber erupted. Species shouted in dozens of languages, some in support, others in confusion or outrage. The Vrex delegation stood as one, scales bristling with fury. The Althari representatives shimmered with agitation. Lord Sovereign raised a hand and silence fell. "The humans have shown us what we refused to see." The Edict of Limitation was not designed to prevent war. It was designed to prevent challenge. We created a system where only those with our evolutionary advantages could thrive, where only our preferred methods of warfare were permitted. Lord Entropy's dark form swirled forward. "Dr. Sarah Chen, Commander Marcus Webb, Admiral Zhang, you have accused the Council of maintaining inequality. You have claimed that our laws favor energy-based species over kinetic-based species. We have reviewed your mathematical proofs. Your analysis is correct," Sarah blinked. She had expected denial, pushback, anything but agreement. "But correctness does not absolve you," Lord Entropy added. "You have spread a weapon throughout the galaxy. You have armed species who do not understand the consequences of relativistic warfare. You have created the conditions for a new age of destruction." Admiral Zhang stood, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "With respect, lords, the conditions for destruction already existed. The only difference is that now everyone has access to it, not just your chosen powers." "Exactly," Lord Sovereign said, "and that is why we must make an unprecedented decision." The 5 lords moved together, their forms merging into a single pillar of light that reached from floor to ceiling. When they spoke, their voices harmonized into something that sounded almost human. "We, the 5 lords of the Galactic Council, hereby abolish our absolute authority. We yield our eternal rule. We bow to the will of the assembled species." The chamber went silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. "Furthermore," the lords continued, "we acknowledge that the Edict of Limitation was flawed in its creation and unjust in its enforcement. The edict is hereby dissolved. All restrictions based on weapon type are removed. All species are granted equal access to defensive and offensive technologies." Sarah felt tears on her face and didn't know when she had started crying. Marcus grabbed her hand, squeezing so hard it hurt. Around them, the human delegation was frozen in shock. "But," the Lord said, and Sarah's hope faltered, "we do not leave the galaxy without structure. We propose a new council, one that reflects the diversity of all species, regardless of their age or power." Lord Architect separated from the merged form, its geometric shape projecting holographic documents into the center of the chamber. We propose the formation of a rotating council leadership, elected by all member species. Terms will be limited. Authority will be distributed. No single species or group of species will hold permanent power. We propose, Lord Entropy added, the creation of a Council of Sciences, dedicated to preventing weapons proliferation, while ensuring no species is technologically disadvantaged. This council will include representatives from energy-based, kinetic-based, biological, and quantum species. And we propose, Lord Sovereign finished, that humanity, having forced this change, take a leadership role in the new order. Dr. Sarah Chen, you are hereby appointed to the Council of Sciences. Commander Marcus Webb, you will lead the Joint Military Task Force. Admiral Zhang, you will advise on the restructuring of galactic defense. Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't move. This was more than she had hoped for, more than she had dreamed possible. The Vrex representative stood shaking with rage. This is unacceptable. The humans attacked us, destroyed our flagship, and you reward them? Lord Sovereign's form brightened. The Vrex Dominion is hereby censured for unprovoked aggression against New Terra Colony. Lord Thexaran, had he survived, would face trial for war crimes. Your forces will withdraw from all contested territories. Your fleet will be reduced by 50%, and you will pay reparations to the human colonists of New Terra. The Vrex representative opened his mouth to protest, but Lord Entropy cut him off. Or you can withdraw from the council entirely. The choice is yours. The Vrex delegation conferred in heated whispers. Finally, their representative sat down, scales dulled in defeat. An Althari representative stood, its crystalline body reflecting the chamber lights in fractal patterns. And what of us? The Althari Consortium has profited from selling council-approved weapons for millennia. This restructuring will destroy our economy. No, Lord Architect replied. It will force your economy to adapt. You can choose to sell railgun components alongside energy weapons, or you can choose to fall behind. The galaxy no longer favors energy-based technology exclusively. More species began to speak, some in support, others in opposition. The Coalition for Edict Reform, now numbering 32 species, stood together in solidarity. The older powers looked uncertain, calculating the political and economic costs of this new order. Sarah watched it all unfold with a mix of wonder and terror. They had wanted change, had fought for change, but now that it was here, the reality felt overwhelming. Marcus leaned close, whispering, "Did we just accidentally reform the entire galactic government?" "I think so," Sarah whispered back. "Are we qualified for this?" "Absolutely not." They looked at each other and started laughing, quiet and slightly hysterical. The kind of laughter that comes from surviving something that should have killed you. The debate continued for hours. The chamber split into factions. Those who supported the Lord's decision, those who opposed it, and those who wanted modifications. Proposals flew back and forth. Amendments were suggested. Compromises were negotiated. Finally, as the artificial day cycle in the chamber dimmed toward evening, Lord Sovereign called for a vote. All species in favor of the proposed restructuring, manifest your approval. Lights appeared throughout the chamber representing species votes. Sarah watched the count climb. 100 species, 200, 300. The coalition species voted unanimously in favor. Many younger species followed. Some older species, after long deliberation, added their votes. When the count finished, 583 species had voted in favor. 264 had voted against or abstained. It was enough. The restructuring was approved. Lord Sovereign's form flickered, and Sarah could have sworn she saw something like relief in the ancient being's energy pattern. Then it is decided. The age of the Five Lords' absolute rule has ended. The new council will convene in 30 days to begin the process of drafting a new charter. The Lords began to fade, returning to whatever dimensional realm they inhabited. But Lord Sovereign paused, its form hovering in front of the human delegation. "Dr. Chen," it said, its voice softer now, almost gentle. "You asked why we created the edict. You accused us of maintaining dominance through restriction." "Yes," Sarah said, standing to face the ancient being. "You were correct," Lord Sovereign admitted. "But we did not do it out of malice. We did it out of fear. We survived the kinetic wars, watched species destroy each other with terrible weapons. We thought that by limiting those weapons we could prevent future wars. Instead, we only limited who could wage them. The Lord's form brightened. You humans have taught us that security cannot come from controlling others. It must come from equal strength, equal vulnerability, equal respect. We thank you for this lesson, even though it cost you dearly. It cost us one ship and many lives, Sarah said. But it bought us a voice. More than that, Lord Sovereign replied. It bought the galaxy a future where all voices can be heard. Use your new authority wisely, Dr. Chen. The species who oppose this change will be watching, waiting for you to fail. Then we won't fail, Sarah said. The Lord faded completely and the chamber began to empty. Species delegations filed out, some celebrating, others grumbling, all of them processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. The human delegation stayed seated, too shocked to move. Ambassador Liu finally broke the silence. I need to call Earth. The president is going to want a full briefing. She paused. What do I even tell him? That we accidentally overthrew the galactic government? Tell him, Admiral Zhang said, standing and straightening her uniform, that humanity has proven we belong here. Not as subjects, not as clients, but as equals. Over the next weeks, the galaxy transformed in ways both subtle and profound. The Vrex Dominion fragmented as client species, emboldened by the Council changes, declared independence. The Althari Consortium scrambled to adapt its economy, forming partnerships with human weapons manufacturers. 23 younger species began rapid militarization, acquiring railgun technology and training crews in kinetic warfare. Sarah found herself at the center of it all. The Council of Sciences met daily, working to create guidelines for technology sharing, weapons development, and defensive systems. She sat in conferences with brilliant minds from hundreds of worlds, all trying to answer an impossible question. How do you prevent war in a galaxy where everyone has equal weapons? Marcus led training exercises, teaching alien species the principles of kinetic warfare. He worked with Vrex officers seeking redemption, with Quilix engineers building their first railguns, with Viridian tacticians rethinking centuries of military doctrine. Admiral Zhang advised the new council leadership on fleet reformation, arguing for distributed power structures, mixed species crews, and joint defense initiatives. She was patient, forceful, and utterly unwilling to accept the old hierarchies. Earth's shipyards worked around the clock. 47 ships were equipped with railgun systems, then 90, then 150. Human weapons technology became one of Earth's major exports, alongside agricultural products and entertainment media. But the most significant change was harder to see, harder to quantify. Throughout the galaxy, species that had been restricted, limited, and controlled began to stand taller. They questioned old laws, challenged old assumptions, and demanded equal treatment. The Coalition for Edict Reform became the Coalition for Galactic Equity, growing to 89 member species. Not everyone was happy. The Vrex launched several failed military actions trying to reclaim their lost dominance. 3 hardline species withdrew from the Council entirely, rejecting the new order. And there were accidents as species new to railgun technology made mistakes that cost lives. But slowly, gradually, the galaxy adapted. 6 months after the railgun fired, Sarah stood in the same observation deck where she had first looked out at the Council capital and felt trapped by ancient rules. Now she looked out and saw something different. Marcus joined her, carrying 2 containers of something the Quilix called celebration nectar, though it tasted more like fermented disappointment. Zixith says the Quilix successfully tested their first railgun today, Marcus reported. Hit a target at 500,000 kilometers. That's good, Sarah said. Better than our first test. To be fair, our first test was in actual combat. They stood in companionable silence, watching ships move through the sky. The traffic patterns had changed, Sarah noticed. Ships from smaller species mixed freely with the larger powers now, no longer confined to restricted lanes. Do you think we did the right thing? Marcus asked quietly. Sarah considered the question. 2 million colonists saved. The Lord's absolute power ended. The galaxy restructured toward equality. But also weapons spread throughout space, old hierarchies shattered, stability replaced by uncertainty. I think, Sarah said finally, we did the human thing. We saw an injustice and refused to accept it. We saw a fight we couldn't win with their rules, so we changed the rules. The Vrex are calling us barbarians, Marcus said. The Althari say we've doomed the galaxy to chaos. Maybe we have, Sarah admitted. But at least it's fair chaos. Everyone has the same weapons now. Everyone has the same chance. Marcus raised his container in a toast. To fair chaos, then. Sarah clinked her container against his. And to humanity. The species that looked at 100,000 years of tradition and said, "No thanks. We'll do it our way." They drank the terrible nectar and watched the galaxy turn. On Earth, the UES Defiance was being retired. The ship that had fired the first shot of the new age would become a museum, a monument to the day when humanity refused to bow. The Railgun, Project Thor, would be preserved exactly as it was, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't the one that destroys the most, but the one that changes everything. In the council chambers, representatives debated the new charter, arguing over clauses and amendments, trying to build a government that would treat all species fairly. It was messy, slow, frustrating work. But for the first time in 100,000 years, everyone had a voice. And in spaces between stars, the Five Lords watched. They were no longer rulers, but they were still observers, still ancient, still wise in ways that younger species couldn't understand. They watched humanity spread through the galaxy, bringing their strange mix of cooperation and defiance, building alliances and challenging assumptions. Lord Sovereign observed Sarah Chen in the Council of Sciences, arguing passionately for safety protocols while refusing to limit species' access to technology. The ancient being felt something it hadn't experienced in millennia: pride, not in itself but in those it had once ruled. Perhaps, Lord Sovereign thought, the humans were right. Perhaps the galaxy needed to be shaken. Perhaps absolute rule, no matter how well-intentioned, was just another form of tyranny. The lords had bowed, and the galaxy was better for it. 3 years after the shot heard across the galaxy, Sarah Chen stood in the Smithsonian Orbital Museum, staring at the weapon that had changed everything. The UES Defiance hung in the vast exhibition hall, suspended in a null-gravity field, its hull still bearing scars from the Battle of New Terra. Visitors from dozens of species floated around the ship, reading plaques, taking holographic images, and marveling at the massive railgun that ran along its spine. Project Thor, longbow, the weapon that fired once and broke 100,000 years of tradition. "Dr. Chen," a young voice called out. Sarah turned to see a group of students, a mixed class of humans and aliens, floating toward her with their instructor. The instructor was Viridian, with silver skin that caught the museum's lights. "Students, this is Dr. Sarah Chen," the instructor said. "She designed the railgun you're looking at." The students stared at her with wide eyes. One human boy, maybe 12 years old, raised his hand. "Did you know it would work?" Sarah smiled. "Honestly? No, we had never tested it. We built it in 6 days and fired it in combat. We hoped it would work, but we didn't know." A Quilix student, her compound eyes reflecting rainbow patterns, asked, "Were you scared?" "Terrified," Sarah admitted. "We were betting millions of lives on an untested weapon based on physics theory and desperate hope." "But you did it anyway," a small Viridian child said, his voice filled with awe. "We did it anyway," Sarah confirmed, "because sometimes doing something scary is better than doing nothing at all." The instructor guided the students closer to the railgun, explaining the electromagnetic principles, the capacitor arrays, the targeting solutions. Sarah watched them learn. These children who had grown up in a galaxy where all species had equal access to technology, where the old hierarchies meant nothing. They would never know the frustration of being limited by arbitrary rules. They would never feel the rage of watching established powers ignore injustice because it was convenient. They had inherited a galaxy that was messy and chaotic and infinitely more fair than the one Sarah had been born into. Dr. Chen, another voice, this one familiar. Marcus Webb floated over, now wearing the uniform of the Joint Defense Initiative, the mixed species military organization he had helped create. "I thought I'd find you here. I come once a month," Sarah said, "to remember." They floated together in silence, looking at the Defiance, at the visitors from 100 worlds learning about the day humanity refused to bow. "The Council of Sciences approved your proposal," Marcus said. "The new weapons treaties will include provisions for kinetic, energy, biological, and quantum systems. Equal restrictions, equal permissions." "Good," Sarah said. "That's what we fought for." "Admiral Zhang sends her regards," Marcus continued. "She's retiring next month. Says she's tired of politics and wants to teach at the academy. Sarah laughed. Admiral Zhang, teaching cadets how to be diplomatic? That should be entertaining. She says she's going to teach them how to win by changing the rules, Marcus replied. I think she'll be excellent at it. A chime sounded through the museum announcing the daily ceremony. Sarah and Marcus made their way to the central viewing platform, joining hundreds of other visitors. The lights dimmed and a holographic display illuminated the space around the Defiance. The display showed the Battle of New Terra, recreated from sensor data and survivor accounts. The desperate defense, the overwhelming Vrex fleet, the Defiance charging its weapon while human ships died to buy time. Then the shot, brilliant and terrible, crossing space in less than a second. Sarah had seen the display dozens of times, but it still made her throat tight. When the display ended, showing the Vrex fleet fleeing and New Terra saved, the lights came back up. A plaque near the railgun glowed with illuminated text. The weapon that fired once and changed everything. In memory of all who gave their lives at the Battle of New Terra, and in honor of those who dared to challenge an unjust system, may we never forget that true strength lies not in domination, but in the courage to demand equality. It's strange, Marcus said as they left the museum. We built a weapon of war and it brought peace. Not peace, Sarah corrected. Balance. The galaxy isn't peaceful. There are still conflicts, still wars, still problems, but now everyone fights on equal footing. They took a transport shuttle to the council station, the massive structure that orbited the capital world. The station had been rebuilt in the 3 years since the restructuring, designed to reflect the new order. Instead of the 5 lords' thrones dominating the chamber, there was now a circular council table where representatives from all 847 species could meet as equals. Sarah entered the Council of Sciences chamber, where beings from dozens of worlds worked together on technology policy. Her office overlooked the main floor, a space filled with holographic displays, experimental equipment, and researchers from every corner of the galaxy. Mathematician Zixeth was waiting for her, along with 3 other council members. Dr. Chen, we have a situation that requires your expertise. Sarah settled into her chair, pulling up the briefing documents. What kind of situation? The Korvax species has developed a new shield technology, Zixeth explained. It claims to be effective against both energy and kinetic weapons. They want to patent it and sell it exclusively to allied species. Sarah frowned. That violates the technology equity accords. All defensive technologies must be shared equally. The Korvax argue that it's their intellectual property, another council member said. A Viridian named Kanseth, the same observer who had tried to stop the railgun construction 3 years ago. They say the accords infringe on their rights to profit from their innovations. And if we let them sell it exclusively, Sarah said, thinking through the implications, we're back to technological inequality. Species who can afford it get better defenses. Species who can't are vulnerable. Exactly, Zixeth said. We need to decide, does equity override profit? Sarah looked at the gathered beings, representatives of different evolutionary paths, different philosophies, different values. 3 years ago, the 5 lords would have simply decreed an answer. Now they had to debate, compromise, and build consensus. Here's what I propose, Sarah said. The Korvax can patent their technology and profit from it. But after 2 years, the patent expires and the technology becomes public domain. That way, innovation is rewarded, but equality is maintained. The council members debated the proposal, suggesting modifications, pointing out potential problems. They argued for an hour before reaching a compromise. 3 years of exclusive rights, then mandatory technology sharing with compensation from the council treasury. It wasn't perfect, but it was fair. This was the new galaxy. Messier, more complicated, but infinitely more just than the old order. That evening, Sarah attended a ceremony at the human embassy. Admiral Zhang was officially retiring, and dignitaries from across the galaxy had come to honor her service. The admiral stood at the podium, looking uncomfortable with all the attention, as species after species praised her leadership. When it was Sarah's turn to speak, she stepped to the podium and looked at the assembled crowd. Humans, Viridians, Quilix, even a few Vrex officers who had joined the reformed military. Admiral Zhang taught me that rules are not sacred, Sarah said, that sometimes the most moral thing you can do is break an immoral law. 3 years ago, we violated the Edict of Limitation. We built a weapon that terrified the galaxy's powers. And we did it because 2 million lives were worth more than ancient traditions. Zhang watched her with those sharp eyes, a slight smile on her face. But the Admiral also taught me something else, Sarah continued, that changing the system isn't enough. You have to build something better to replace it. We didn't just break the edict. We created the Technology Equity Accords. We built the Joint Defense Initiative. We established the Council of Sciences. We gave the galaxy not just equal weapons, but equal voices. Sarah raised her glass. To Admiral Zhang, the woman who taught us that humanity's greatest strength isn't our weapons or our technology. It's our refusal to accept injustice even when the entire galaxy says we should. The crowd echoed the toast, and Zhang nodded in acknowledgement. Later, as the party wound down, Sarah found herself on a balcony overlooking the capital city. Zhang joined her, carrying 2 glasses of actual Earth whiskey, smuggled through proper channels. You did well in there, Zhang said, handing Sarah a glass. I learned from the best, Sarah replied. They drank in comfortable silence, watching the city lights sparkle below. Ships from 100 worlds moved through the sky, no longer segregated by power or privilege. Do you think it will last? Sarah asked. This new order we built? Zhang considered the question. Nothing lasts forever. Eventually, some species will try to game the system, find advantages, build new hierarchies. That's what power does. It corrupts and concentrates. That's depressing, Sarah said. But, Zhang continued, we've given the galaxy something it didn't have before. A precedent. We proved that absolute rule can be challenged, that ancient systems can be changed, that even the lords can be made to bow. She looked at Sarah. When the next injustice arises, and it will, someone will remember the railgun. They'll remember that humanity said no, and maybe they'll have the courage to say no too. Sarah thought about that, about the students in the museum, learning about the Battle of New Terra, about the Coalition for Galactic Equity, still growing, still fighting for fairness, about the Council of Sciences, working every day to maintain the balance between innovation and equality. We didn't save the galaxy, Sarah said. We just gave it a chance to save itself. That's all anyone can do, Zhang replied. Across the city and the council archives, historians were recording the events of the past 3 years. The Battle of New Terra, the abolition of the edict, the restructuring of galactic government. They cataloged it all, preserving the details for future generations. In the military academies, instructors taught cadets about kinetic warfare, energy weapons, and hybrid defense systems. They taught tactics and strategy, but also philosophy and ethics. They made sure every officer understood that technology without wisdom was just destruction with extra steps. In laboratories throughout the galaxy, scientists collaborated on projects that would have been impossible under the old system. Energy-based species shared their knowledge with kinetic-based species. Quantum researchers worked alongside biological engineers. Innovation flourished in ways the Five Lords had never imagined. And in quiet moments, in private spaces, beings from hundreds of worlds told their children stories about the day humanity fired a railgun and changed the galaxy forever. 5 years after that day, Sarah Chen received an unexpected visitor. She was in her office at the Council of Sciences, reviewing proposals for new defensive technologies, when her assistant announced that Lord Sovereign wished to speak with her. Sarah hadn't seen any of the Five Lords since the restructuring. They had retreated to their dimensional realm, honoring their promise to yield authority. Their appearance now filled her with concern. Lord Sovereign materialized in her office, its energy form dimmer than she remembered. Dr. Chen, thank you for seeing me. Lord Sovereign, Sarah said, standing. Is something wrong? No, the ancient being replied. I came to deliver a message. A farewell. Sarah felt a chill. Farewell? The Five Lords are leaving this dimension, Sovereign explained. We have ruled for 100,000 years. We have seen civilizations rise and fall, but we have also grown stagnant, comfortable, blind to the changes the galaxy needed. The Lord's form flickered. You humans showed us that our time had passed, that new voices, new ideas, new methods were required. We are grateful for that lesson, even though it was painful to learn. Where will you go? Sarah asked. Beyond, Sovereign said. There are other dimensions, other realities that need observation. We will watch from afar, but we will not rule. That task belongs to younger beings now. We'll make mistakes, Sarah warned. We already have. Of course you will. Sovereign replied. But they will be new mistakes, not the same ancient errors repeated endlessly. That is growth. That is evolution. The Lord drifted closer. Before I go, I want you to understand something. The railgun was important, but it was not what changed the galaxy. What changed the galaxy was your refusal to accept our answer when we said no. Your insistence that the rules could be questioned. Your courage to stand before powers that had existed for longer than your species has had written language and say, "You are wrong." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. We were just trying to save our people. And in doing so, you saved all people, Sovereign said. You gave the galaxy permission to change. That is a greater gift than any weapon. The Lord began to fade. Goodbye, Dr. Sarah Chen. Thank you for teaching an ancient being that wisdom is not the same as age and that power is not the same as rightness. Goodbye, Lord Sovereign, Sarah whispered. Thank you for being willing to learn. The ancient being vanished, and Sarah was alone in her office. She pulled up a holographic display of the galaxy, watching the network of civilizations that spread across 100,000 light years. Somewhere out there, the U.S. Defiant sat in a museum, a monument to the day everything changed. Somewhere, students learned about physics and ethics and the courage to challenge authority. Somewhere, the next injustice was brewing and the next rebels were preparing to say no. The galaxy wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was better, fairer, more equal, and that was enough. Sarah Chen, the woman who had designed a weapon of war and accidentally reformed galactic government, returned to her work. There were proposals to review, technologies to evaluate, species to mediate between, the unglamorous, difficult work of maintaining a fair society. Outside her window, ships moved through space, carrying beings of every imaginable form to every corner of the galaxy. They traded, explored, argued, cooperated, and sometimes fought. But they did it as equals, with equal tools and equal voices. The age of the lords had ended. The age of equity had begun, and it had started with a single shot, fired by desperate humans who refused to accept an unjust galaxy, who looked at 100,000 years of tradition and said simply, "No more. We will not bow." And against all probability, against all precedent, against the weight of ages and the power of gods, the galaxy had listened. The first human railgun fired, and the lords of the galaxy bowed at last. And in that bowing, in that moment of humility from beings older than stars, the galaxy found something it had been missing for 100,000 years. Hope that things could change, hope that justice could be won, hope that even the smallest voice could reshape the universe. It was a good hope, and it would endure.